Hey, it's Rob, and welcome to Axel's Garage. Today we're out here. It's a beautiful, a little breezy Sunday afternoon. And if it was 10 years ago, you know, when you have a problem with one of your older cars, you hit the forums. And over the years, those message boards and forums have kind of subsided a little bit to these Facebook groups. So yeah, I belong to Chevelle Facebook groups and Camaro Facebook groups for Baby Mama's IROC here. A lot of Blazer and Square Body Facebook groups because of Robbie's K5, and I'm a big K5 fan. I had one. It was my first brand new car coming out of high school. So I always keep track of them. I'm members of them on Facebook, and you get notifications come up. And you know, it's the summertime. It's getting near the end of the summer, but it is the summertime. And a big question that comes up is, I'm overheating. How do I fix it? Right? And here it is. I'm overheating. How do I fix it? Right? They get on Facebook. No other information than that. Whether it's an IROC, a Z28, whether it's a K5, whether it's a Chevelle, whether it's any, you know, old school muscle car, truck, anything like that. I'm talking about something pre-OBD2 computers. And they get on. I'm overheating. Really not much information. Sometimes they'll say, when I get stuck in traffic, I creep and creep and creep, and I overheat, or I creep in this situation, it gets hotter and hotter and hotter, and it seems not to level out at all until I turn the car off. And then people will get on, and the right people will ask more information. We need to know when you're overheating, when you're not overheating, when it's running fine, and try to get that information. Usually the original poster never gives you that information, so you can never really answer their question completely. And then you get everybody, the keyboard commandos, I call them, hey, take the thermostat out, it'll fix it. And take the thermostat out. That's like the number one thing. Get rid of your thermostat, you don't need it. Well, you do. Your car shouldn't overheat with a thermostat in it. And taking a thermostat out is a Band-Aid fix. You're not figuring out what your problem is. So, you got systems in these cars that prevent you from overheating. You have a cooling system, right? The cooling system consists of a radiator, hoses, coolant or antifreeze, depending on where you're from in the country, you're going to call it, and that system needs to be working. But there are a lot of other systems that contribute to heat in the engine. So, like in this car right here, it's got a decent sized radiator. What doesn't it have is a big grill. So you get some airflow around your fog lights, right, that are going back into the radiator, and then you also get some airflow under the car, and there is an air dam. Robbie, if you can bend down there, you could probably see the air dam sticking down. Right? You have that air dam. What that air dam does is it directs the air that's coming onto your car back up and towards the radiator where it needs to be. That's in this one. In this old K5 here, well, old, to me it's not old, depending on how old you are, it might be old, but this one's got a giant grill with giant holes through it, and the air comes through here, hitting the radiator, and making that heat transfer happen in the radiator here. If you have a Chevelle, if you have a Cutlass, if you have something else, a Camaro, whether it's 80s, 70s, 60s, they're all basically the same. You got a radiator mounted somewhere that gets airflow. Now, that's not the radiator, the thermostat, and that coolant isn't the only thing that keeps a car cool, and that's not the only thing you need to look at if you're having overheating problems. So, what we're going to do is we're going to sit down, and I'm going to answer all the questions on all the message boards, the Facebook groups, and the forums that I've seen about overheating, because I can't possibly type it with my thumbs on my phone. And we're going to talk about the different systems that cause your car to run hot or to overheat, and what you could do to make your car run more efficiently so that you can enjoy it more in the hot weather. So I'm going to sit on the fender. The big dummy is going to put that camera on the tripod. He's going to beer me. Give me a beer, dummy. The millennials. And we're going to talk about the reasons why your car runs hot and how to prevent it from running hot. All right, so right away people always say thermostat, you know, radiator, condition of the radiator. Let's assume that the thermostat is working properly. So whether you have a car that takes a 195 degree thermostat or one of the older cars that take a 180, it doesn't matter. Putting a 160 in is sort of a Band-Aid fix and it's an extreme fix, meaning if everything else is good and changing that thermostat to 160 is the only thing that's going to work because you have a super custom application, well, then that's something that's outside the normal. Let's talk about these two vehicles in particular, right? OBD1 vehicles, 195 degree thermostat from the factory. It should open, somewhere a little past 195, and it should close right about, backing up again at about 195 or so you want to keep that temperature anywhere from 190 to 200 degrees. So for argument's sake, if it's going to run at 200 degrees with a 195 thermostat, you're good running at that speed all day long. The biggest complaint is creep. As I drive it, it starts creeping, gets hotter and hotter and hotter, and it doesn't necessarily go away. Well, there's three major systems that contribute to heat and overheating or running hot, and those are fuel, ignition, and cooling system. So the easiest one to talk about at first is fuel. So let's talk about fuel, and they're all dependent on each other, really. So when we talk about fuel pump, right? The OBD1 cars, generally speaking, have they have fuel injection, so they have electric fuel pumps. Most times they're in the tank. Is that fuel pump performing well? You got a 30-year-old car, 30-year-old car, 32-year-old, whatever it might be. It could very possibly have the original pump in it. It could have had a cheapo Chinese replacement that's not putting out the PSI that it should be putting out. Is there a regulator in the system? Is that regulator regulating your fuel pressure to where it should be? So a fuel pressure check is number one. A lot of old school mechanics will say fuel filter if there's one in the vehicle. Most vehicles have them, some don't. Fuel filter. When was the last time you changed that? Is that filter in good condition? Is the filter allowing enough flow? So you're going to change that filter. If you know you got a good new filter in it, checking your fuel pressure after the change of the filter is important. A lot of mechanics, my own local mechanic says, whenever you have an issue like that has anything to do with fuel or ignition, time for a bottle of Techron. And he swears by the Techron. He says, you dump that Techron in the tank, you should do it as part of your normal preventative maintenance to keep your fuel system clean. He said today's fuels just have too much crap in them that lead to buildup and corrosion, and Techron, he found, as a professional mechanic doing it for a living, is a good preventative maintenance kind of thing. So let's say we got fuel filters, they're good. Fuel pressure, some vehicles will have rail-mounted Schrader valves where you could check fuel pressure. If you have the equipment at home to do that, or you got a buddy that's got the equipment and you could borrow it, or you could go to a shop and check your fuel pressure. Checking your fuel pressure is good. For fuel injected vehicles, fuel injectors get clogged and they last a long time. So the problem is you think you got good injectors and your injectors are partially clogged, leading to less fuel. And the reason why fuel is important is because a lean condition will cause your engine to run hot. I'm not going to get into the science behind why it causes your engine to run hot. Let's just agree that a lean condition will have your engine run hot. So you want to make sure that that's not what the cause is. So if you got a carbureted vehicle, make sure that your idle adjustment is where it needs to be. And carburetors are a lot different. I don't want to dive too deep into carburetors because you have your idle circuit and then you have your jet circuit. So you got to make sure your idle circuit's good where it needs to be, and you got to make sure your jets are jetted properly. And if you got to fatten them up a little bit, which means go to a larger jet to let more fuel in when you're off idle, if that's where you're having your overheating issues, off idle, then you got to fatten them up a little bit. Now, you got clean fuel injectors, you got working fuel injectors that are spraying good. If all that's good, then your fuel system's good. You look at your ignition system. The number one thing that will cause you to overheat in your ignition system is timing. And a lot of people don't realize that they can adjust timing on these OBD1 vehicles that are fuel injected just as easy as you can in my old school 67 Chevelle. I'll show you a pic here. So in my Chevelle, I have an ignition curve. I have a distributor that I can adjust the curve so I can set my initial and my total timing. And you can adjust springs and weights for that total timing to come in faster or have it go longer. In these vehicles, with the primitive computer systems they have and the primitive distributors they have, it's not so easy to tailor your timing system. But your baseline should be where it's supposed to be. And in a lot of these vehicles, it could be at 6, like this vehicle is its base timing. That vehicle is at 0. And the issue is a lot of times they're timed wrong. And I'm gonna put a link here, and then I'll put another one right after that again. And those 2 links are for timing on the Blazer, timing on this car. They're pretty much the same, except that that wire that you have to disconnect, and you have to disconnect the computer from the vehicle just by unplugging a wire, and it's there and it's made for you to unplug when you do the timing, so you could set your timing to the right amount so that when you plug that computer back in, your computer knows, all right, the timing should be here. And that's a timing video, and that's for another conversation. If you want to watch those videos, I linked them above. But retarded timing that's coming in too late, that will make your car run hot as well. So you got lean condition running hot, retarded timing running hot. Along with the ignition system, along with your timing is, are your wires in good shape? Are your plugs in good shape? When was the last time you changed them? When was the last time you even checked them, right? As plug wires get old, they get resistance through them. As spark plugs get old, they get resistance and they take more juice to fire. And sometimes they don't always fire because they're too old, especially the wires. The wires, as they get old and brittle from the heat, the resistance gets high. They could also jump from, the spark can jump from one wire to the other if they're damaged. And a lot of time, they don't need to be damaged because they're frayed. They heat crack and that spark can jump. So your ignition system being in good shape. Remember, at idle, your engine is spinning anywhere from 600 to 850 times a minute. Think about that just for a second. 600 to 850 a minute. So as soon as you go to give it gas and you're going at 1500, that's 1500 times the motor's turning over a minute. Do the math in your head, 8 cylinders or 6 cylinders if you have 6 cylinders. How many times a piston is sparking, and that explosion is happening in each cylinder a minute when you're driving the car at 1500 or 2000, 2500 or 3000 RPMs. The engine's spinning at 3000 RPMs. Think about it, that's fast. 4000 RPMs, it's really fast. Now think about how many times that distributor is sending that spark to a spark plug per minute, a lot. So that rotor is spinning around like crazy. Is that rotor in good condition? Is that distributor cap in good condition? Anything interruption in there that causes a delay in the spark getting to where it needs to be to fire that mixture, a late spark is like retarded timing. So if your rotor's not up to speed, your distributor cap's not up to speed, your wires aren't up to speed, your spark plugs aren't up to speed, you're getting a late spark. It could be 1 degree in equivalent of timing. It could be 2 degrees in equivalent of timing. By the time the spark gets there, fighting all the resistance of the old parts that you have in your car, yeah, that will simulate a retarded timing condition, and that retarded timing condition will make your engine run hotter. So it's not just about the cooling system is what I'm trying to say. You got to make sure your fuel system's in good shape. You got to make sure your ignition system's in good shape. Your timing is dead on. Then if all of that checks out and you're still running hot, all right, now we're going to look at the cooling system. So waiting for the end of the video, I wanted to go over a couple of big factors in your cooling system. You have airflow, you have water flow, you have a thermostat, and you have a temperature exchange which happens in your radiator. So if your radiator is in good shape, that's where the temperature exchange takes place. So number one, your radiator's got to be in good shape. If it's old and crusty and built up inside, you could try off-the-shelf auto parts store radiator flush. Keep flushing it, keep flushing it, keep flushing it until you're confident that it's clean. If it's showing signs of leaking, if you have a local radiator shop near you and you're having overheating issues that you've narrowed down to your cooling system, it's not a bad idea to take your radiator out and have it boiled out professionally. We used to have a place just a few blocks away from here where we could bring a radiator, and I think it was like $50. They would boil it out and give it back to you, painted like it was and it looked like a brand new radiator, and it was clean on the inside, so it was gonna work. Problem with boiling radiators out is a lot of times it loosens up some embedded rust in there, and the service life of that radiator now is a little bit shorter because it got rid of all that scaled rust that was almost holding it together. But if you know you got a good radiator, you could move on to your coolant. Is your coolant clean? Is the ratio, of antifreeze to water proper? All right, thermostat. Is your thermostat functioning proper? Are your hoses in good condition? Hoses can look good from the outside, they deteriorate from the inside out. So they clog, sort of like an artery clogs with somebody who's been eating butter and steak their whole life. Well, the hose companies recommend changing hoses every 4 years. And they do that maybe to sell more hoses, but a lot of times it's because hoses deteriorate from the inside out. And by changing the hoses every 4 years, it usually ensures that you have, if you got an 1.5 inch opening in that hose, the 1.5 inch opening stays 1.5 inches. And you want that flow. That flow also goes to your water pump. Is your water pump spinning at the right speed? Well, in a truck like Robbie's or my wife's IROC, all the pulleys are stock. The pump is a stock replacement if it's ever been replaced, and you know that it's spinning at the right speed. In a car like my Chevelle, where I've changed engines and changed pulleys and put different stuff in it, sometimes the ratio of those pulleys, whether it's a small pulley or a big pulley, can change the speed of the water pump, and you could have flow problems. So how do you determine what your problem is? Well, it's easy. A lot of the questions are, you know what, I drive, and then when I get caught in traffic, it starts to creep up and get hot, and it creeps and creeps and creeps and creeps. And then when I start driving again, it's better. So they assume right away it's a problem with their fan, because it's an airflow problem. Their fan's not turning enough at low speeds when they're stuck in traffic. Could be, but might not be. And how you troubleshoot that is by getting a good big fan, a big box fan. If you have a big box fan or a pedestal fan that throws a lot of air, if you have one of them, you're good. What I did was I went to my local volunteer firehouse and I asked to borrow, right in their parking lot, one of their exhaust fans. So I pulled my car up, and I did this with my Chevelle. I was having that trouble. It was getting hot in traffic, and I wanted to determine whether it was airflow or not. So I got it to the condition where it was starting to creep and creep and creep, pulled into the parking lot, let it idle, and it's creeping and creeping and creeping. I put one of those big exhaust fans blowing at the car right in front of the radiator and let it go. And I watched my temperature gauge, and my temperature gauge continued to creep. All right, so now I'm getting airflow. I know I'm getting airflow across that radiator. I know the radiator's in good condition. It was a brand new radiator. My hoses were in good condition. My thermostat worked. And I'm still creeping. Why am I creeping? I don't know. So now I give the car a little bit of gas. So you give the car a little bit of gas, that increases fan speed. Yeah, it gave me a little extra airflow over the fan, but that fan was pumping so much air, that little extra airflow didn't play into it. So as I gave the car some gas, got up to like 1,500, 2,000 RPM sitting there in the parking lot, I saw my gauge coming down. So what does that tell you? It tells you that when the RPMs are up, you're actually running cooler than when you're sitting there at idle. So what could your problem be? Go back to fuel. Problem could be not enough fuel at idle, right? Lean condition, making your car run hot. Problem could be not enough idle timing, right? So now when you give it a little bit of gas, your advance is coming in a little bit more, and you have more distributor advance, whether it's in the computer or it's in the centrifugal weights in the distributor, depending on the vehicle that you have, right? And now it could be timing. So is it timing? I don't know. Or it could be water flow. And that's one of the things I wanted to get to, is water flow. Sometimes you don't have enough flow at idle in your system, right? And that's what's making your car run hot. So that's something that you have to determine. So again, you go back and check your timing, and you go back and check your fuel system. And if you know all that is right, the fan trick, okay, will tell you that you have a water flow problem or you have a airflow problem. And a lot of times what people assume is an airflow problem is really a water flow problem. And that's what the problem was in my particular application, which was my 67 Chevelle. I wasn't flowing hardly any water at idle. At idle, you open that cap up and you look at the radiator going, and it's really not flowing much at all. And that's why they sell high flow pumps and things like that. Now, the engine is a custom application, so even having all the stock parts and pulleys isn't going to make that water flow problem any better, because if it was a stock engine, chances are that I wouldn't be having the overheating issues that I was having with water flow. This one here, okay, seems to be running fine. Doesn't boil over, AC on in the hot summer heat, you know, some of the hottest days of the summer this year, and this thing ran good. Why? Because everything is set. The timing's good. I know the timing is set right. I know my wires and plugs are in good shape. I know my distributor cap and rotor I just changed recently on a video is in good shape, and the fuel system's in good shape, and it's not running hot. Robbie's truck, same thing, right? You got to have all those pieces, and they all interact, because, you know, a little bit of timing that's a little too retarded, just a little bit, and then a little lean, and then a little clog in your radiator can add to a big overheating problem, right? If you can get rid of 2 of those 3 things, your overheating problem might go away, or it might just run a little hotter than normal on a real hot day. Like, okay, you know, I'd be satisfied if this thing ran at 210, okay, on a hot day. If it was real hot out and this thing was running at 210 and it stayed at 210, didn't go over 210, I'm happy all day long, and you should be too. So fixing one of those little things can make a difference in your end result. Fixing all 3 of them, the thing should run like it was designed to run from the factory. The problem is, as they get older and as parts wear out, all right, they give you a restriction. You get a fuel restriction, you get a spark restriction, okay, so you get a lean condition, you get a retard condition, and then you have restrictions in your cooling system, whether they be old hoses, whether it be a replacement pump that's not flowing what the factory pump was flowing. So they do make high flow pumps for small block, for big block. For most vehicles, they'll make a high flow pump option, especially 8 cylinders. I don't think the Jeeps have high flow pumps yet, but they might, you never know. But that's stuff that we can't just type in a message form. That's stuff that would just take too long, and a video makes it a lot easier. So I hope this video will help you address your running hot or overheating issues. Like I said, on a stock vehicle, running through those things, which are things that you should be doing anyway, especially if it's a 30-year-old car. If you're dailying an IROC or a K5, like my wife and my son do, those are things that should be upkept anyway. Yes, there's more maintenance on these old cars, but we want to drive them, so we're willing to put up with the more maintenance. Make sure all your systems are in good shape, and you shouldn't have any problems overheating in the summertime. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, hit that thumbs up, drop a comment, let me know what you think, feed that YouTube algorithm, and as always, thanks for watching.